of people from places where the action was for them to do that for some months, and there was obstruction of it, moving to make way for the expansion of the new A&R Robinson International Airport, and that has been completed. We will talk with him about that this morning. Where do we go from here, and where does the project go from here? Also, we're talking with a minority leader in the Tobago House of Assembly, Mr. Kelvon Morris, again on the issue of the increases in the fares for the air bridge and the sea bridge to some extent, and in some instances he says that it is justified. We'll get behind that as well. Of course, we'll take some steps around the region. We'll tell you where those are when they come up. We want to start this edition of the program with a chat with Mr. Freddie Ferreira. He's identified as a national patriot. He's been recognized as such. He's somebody who was one of the founding members of the, or if not founding, very early members of the People's National Movement. Then he left the party and helped form the Organization for National Reconstruction, the ONR, and then found his way back to the People's National Movement. He's regarded as someone who calls a shot when he sees it, and he doesn't put water in his mouth to say what he has to say. Well, to what extent this issue about the Attorney General and his central role in what is now being referred to in the papers as the Nelson affair, the report that the former Attorney General Ram Logan and his colleague Ram Dean were involved in bribery, and Mr. Nelson was saying that he's on record as saying that they worked an arrangement where he would get state briefs and then he'll have to give back something to the then Attorney General Ram Logan, and that he'd been indemnified to testify against him. And he's broken that because he says that, at least from the reporting about it, that the indemnity does not appear to be fail-safe, and it does not appear to be impregnable. And he's saying that unless he is sure that the indemnity would be upheld, he's not going to testify, on the basis of which the Director of Public Prosecutions, who we have to continue to report, was not apparently involved in the decision to mount this case to begin with. That's one of the issues. And he has said that there's no case because if Mr. Nelson refuses to testify, then all fall down, as we would say in local parlance. That's where the matter is. And there have been these calls for the Attorney General to speak up and for the government to say what it knew. Other people, did Mr. Al-Rawi discuss this with the Prime Minister? Did he discuss it with the Cabinet? If so, there are answers people are saying should come forward. To what extent this has a bearing on the ruling party? Are people talking about it? Should they be talking about it? That's the discussion we're going to have with Mr. Ferreira in a bit. But I think he's Mr. Ferreira. I think, well, yeah, morning. Well, thanks for agreeing to come on. So let me ask you, first of all, what are your own personal...
And if you can, I'm not hearing a little louder.
Yeah, I'm saying, let me just ask you, what are your own... Well, thanks for coming on to discuss this matter. I want to start by asking you, what are your own views about the matter itself and the extent to which it has any bearing on the party?
Hello?
Hello?
Yes. Hello?
Yeah, yes. Something seems to be wrong with our communication. Are you hearing me or are you not hearing me at all?
Hello? And, hello?
Yes, well, I'm hearing you. I can't understand why you're not hearing me.
Hello, Annie?
All right, we'll try and work this out. We're going to take a break. Stay with us. We're coming back.
Hello?
The best laptops and tablets are at dbesttoys.com. Get a Gateway 14.1-inch Ultra Slim notebook or an HP 14-inch laptop at the best prices in TNT. Get the Fire 7 tablet for $474. You can also shop the latest Amazon Fire Sticks. Call now at 32-DBEST to order or visit us in-store at Forces flagship Mac Bean. Shop online now at dbesttoys.com. Free delivery available throughout Trinidad and Tobago. Cash or links on delivery.
Is it politics? What is it? Is it that nobody cares about sports?
The kind of support that sport used to get in the past is no longer here.
The thing is, taking a knee doesn't mean that that's the only thing you're doing now, Andy.
Right.
Taking a knee along with other stuff.
Samantha, what are you looking forward to when you return home to Trinidad and Tobago after winning the title?
Thank you very much for speaking it into existence.
Is there no pressure on Nicholas Paul?
It makes me more motivated to work hard and to go out there and rep the red, white and black.
Why are we sending a team to the Winter Olympics?
There are a number of Trinbagonians who are in the diaspora and have grown up in winter sport. It's an opportunity that the Trinidad and Tobago Olympic Committee will not close the door on.
I also believe in the players that we have. Once you can motivate the players, you can get the best out of them.
Well, let's see if we work the kinks out of the communication between ourselves and our guest, Mr. Freddie Ferreira. You're hearing us now, right?
Andy?
Yes.
Yes, you hearing me now?
Yes, I was always hearing you. You apparently
Yes.
came. All right, so the question is, to what extent this issue is an issue for the party, inside the party? Are people discussing it at any level? Are there concerns about the impact of this, the reverberations from this on the party as such? People are concerned?
I'm not hearing you clearly. Could you speak a little louder?
Well, I'm shouting.
Yes. I don't know what effect it's likely to have on the party with the local government election. The general elections are still some time away. But this country, Andy, hello?
Yes, I'm hearing you.
Yes, this country has a history of non-punishment of public servants and politicians. Going way back from the Coradam issue to the current situation involving Attorney Prince Nelson and the Attorney General. And that is pre-independence. You may recall the famous or infamous gas station inquiry.
Of course. Gene Miles and company and so on. And
that involved
John O'Halloran and so on.
The now famous or infamous Gene Miles. I want to quote something here, Andy. I don't know if you ever saw the report of Justice Carl de la Bastide.
I never saw the actual
on the
report.
Gas station inquiry.
The gas station inquiry. I never saw the actual report, but I never saw the actual report, but I would have seen.
All right, I want to quote for you on the benefit of the national community one of the recommendations.
Yes.
Or the final recommendation of Justice Carl de la Bastide in the report which was published on the 23rd of June 1976, which presented the then Governor General Sir Solomon Hochul. A copy of this report, together with a complete transcript of all evidence recorded at this inquiry, should be without delay transmitted to the Public Service Commission in order that it should be in a position to take such steps as may be necessary under the disciplinary laws of the civil service of Trinidad and Tobago against the senior factory inspector, Mr. Kenneth Tam. This was a recommendation from the Labastide Commission, which was never effected or implemented. So this country has a record of producing the most political Houdinis probably in the world.
All right, and it comes right down.
Unfortunately, this situation involving Mr. Nelson and has to be a source of serious concern to the national community. To what extent it will affect the outcome of it will affect the party and the outcome of the local government or maybe general election. I'm not yet in a position. There's still some time off. There's still these are events that are still some time away from us. But it is a source of serious concern when millions, possibly billions of dollars and of the taxpayers' money are involved in these litigation projects that produce no positive results. People in public office, both at the public service level and the police, continue to misbehave and misconduct themselves in public office. And the system seems to be incapable of punishing them. We have a record of non-punishment of people who commit these costly and expensive. Nobody has been punished. We have the off inquiry. We have the Kiko inquiry. We have the airport inquiry. And to add to it, this situation in which millions, I certainly share the concern of Attorney Pamela Elder. It means something is wrong with the system. We continue to produce these political Houdinis who mysteriously escape after putting the country through these costly, expensive processes and continue to. This ought to be a concern for the citizens of the. And we continue to blame the government, to blame the system, but nothing comes out of it. But here is a case where millions of dollars, pounds, at a time when you are calling on the people of the country to sacrifice, to tighten their belts. And here is a situation in which there seems, I'm not an attorney at law, so I cannot speak with any authority of the law, and I would not attempt to do. But there appears to be some disconnection or something wrong. Something went wrong between the Attorney General and the DPP's office. And this has to be a source of concern to the government.
Right, and that is the real crux of the question. To what extent, I said that is the real crux of the crux of the matter for this discussion, because what I'm trying to get at is to what extent people in the PLM are seeing this as an...
I certainly agree with the observations of Senior Counsel Pamela Elder that there are still questions to be answered by the Attorney General. I mean, as a senior citizen, a patriot of this country, I don't think that I can be satisfied with the comments so far expressed. I think the Attorney General has some more questions to answer as to what went wrong. Because while the government continues to say that the matter is incomplete and they are pursuing other avenues to bring the culprits to justice, the fact of the matter is that millions of dollars has already been spent, and whatever effort they make to pursue the matter, whatever it's going to be more expensive and costly, while the culprits, Mr. Vincent Nelson, now is in a country where we cannot extradite him. Now, to what extent this will affect the outcome of future elections and the PNM, I am not yet in a position to say. We are witnessing a situation in the United States today where one of the most notorious characters in the history of the United States is still extremely popular, enjoying support from a wide cross-section of the electorate, as in a country that's supposed to be the leader of the free world. As Sir Winston Churchill said, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the rest. So sometimes, while you think that people should be punished, or government should be punished and pay a price for these sometimes unforced error, sometimes look at what happened in Brazil with Bolsonaro.
Yeah, well, what I'm trying to get at is the extent to which what I'm trying to get at is this to what I'm trying to get at is the extent to which what you are saying here, is reverberating elsewhere in the party. Are people in the party, in the PNM, seeing this as something that is exposing an Achilles heel, and are they uncomfortable about it? What are they saying? What are the people you converse with? The people, some of your other associates in the ruling party, how are they responding to this? What is the sense of nervousness, if at all, about it? Because the party has a record of closing ranks even in the most challenging of circumstances. What you think should be of concern often is not.
I'm not hearing you. And the speaker is louder. Hello?
Well, something is wrong with our connection, because I say I'm shouting. I'm not speaking softly at all. I'm shouting, and you can't hear me.
Well, what we are witnessing in the country today is political parties and the political leadership at times appear to be, let me put it, I don't want to use the word condoning, but seems to be supportive of the persons who are identified as the culprits of these these alleged acts of misconduct. You have it on both sides, where they always attempt by the leadership to defend and protect the persons who are allegedly responsible for these costly. As a matter of fact, the biggest industry in the country today, as I expressed publicly, and the litigation industry.
Yes.
The biggest industry in the country today. And it is done at the expense of the taxpayers at a time when, these millions and billions of dollars are involved in the litigation protest at a time when we could hardly afford it. Whether it's going to have an effect on the outcome of the future elections, I am in no position to predict. We're fully aware of the history of the voting patterns in the country. And we are almost never in a position to determine the outcome. The marginals are the ones that will determine the outcome of the election, the 5 or 6 marginals. So we continue to be astonished by these costly acts of misconduct.
All right, we're going to
the fact that from, as I said before, from the corridor to the current situation, nobody has been punished.
All right, thank you very much. We're going to have to leave it there. It's a tragedy that the communication is what it is, and we couldn't have a more animated discussion. But one of the things that we could tell you is that on this day, the latest in it is that the Attorney General has said that he sought legal advice on the matters that he was pursuing in this instance, and he said he sought that advice from two senior counsel, Gilbert Peterson let's look at it here. Former Attorney General and current local government minister Faris Al-Rawi defended the state's decision to enter into an indemnity agreement with King's Counsel Vincent Nelson. I took the advice of eminent senior counsel. He said Douglas Mendez and Gilbert Peterson, and the question is, well, what would have been their fees as well to add up to the monies we're talking about here in this case? And it was not so much the question of whether it will affect the results of any election to come, but just the sense of what is there a sense of disquiet, or is there a sense of rallying around the troops and encircling those who are looking at it and want action to be taken? What is the discussion taking place among interest groups inside the ruling party in opposition to what the people in the opposition are seeing? And they're seeing blood and they're calling for blood. But we will take a break. We continue to watch this issue as we go along. Stay with us on the program.
Today I'm excited because we're talking about medicine the Gray's way. Yes, we're talking to Dr. Raquel Supir from Gray's Medical.
Because now I realized, like, the secret, the key. If you give somebody the body they want or the confidence that they're looking for, and you make sure that they know that they have to work really hard to keep it, guess what? They're going to be really healthy.
Tell us a little bit about stretching and the importance of what it is or what it does to your body.
It is really important to stretch your muscles. You can stretch before and after working out. It can limit or reduce your injury. Also able to improve your flexibility.
What's up, Doc? Tuesdays and Thursdays here on WESN, Content Capital.
Very first day they opened, my mother and my father and I came in here. I love to see it. It's neat, really, really neat.
You know, we have many sections in Price Club. The food court section, there's a variety here.
Any one of them you ask, they are very helpful. I love it.
We get low price, specials and everything every day.
The prices are very, very good. It's cheaper than everywhere I've been.
FanZone, your reliable, authentic supplier, has just gotten better. You can now visit our website www.fanzonett.com for your authentic wear and collectibles. The only place where you can use both your Visa debit and credit cards. Visit our website fanzonett.com to make your purchase today.
What's the best way to grab the attention of viewers? Please exercise more patience. You have to be kidding me.
Doing what we do best. I'll say at the very least it's a conspiracy of laziness against the people.
Join me, Keaton Shaw.
And me, Sean Michael Small, for Talking Point.
Weekdays from 8 a.m. to 9:30 a.m.
We go in depth on the trending issues and engage the most controversial newsmakers
as we get them to account to the people for their actions.
You can't go to the government with nothing. You can't go to cabinet with an empty hand, with a wish.
I'm glad that we're having this a sober, mature discussion.
In the present situation, I expect a continuation of the chaos.
Join us for the discussion, Mondays to Fridays,
only on WESN,
the Content Capital. Come travel with us as we explore Diwali across the globe. Diwali is celebrated in many countries worldwide, but do you know the traditions and practices of each nation? From Guyana to Australia, WESN presents Diwali Passport, October 3rd to October 23rd, with replays on October 24th. It's Diwali Passport, a WESN exclusive.
You have to remember, Jerome.
What?
It's just the other day I had a bypass surgery.
That I mean you want to bypass me?
You know the position I in?
Position? When that was? You know how long me see you in a position?
Saturday, November 5th, Shore Park, Tobago. It's Million Laughs Caribbean Comedy Commerce, the mega laugh festival to end the Tobago Carnival season, featuring Tobago's finest in folklore and musical entertainment, together with some of the Caribbean's top comedians, Larry Joseph, Daryl the Saint Mendoza, Dolores, Alan the Entertainer, Handsome Sun, Mako Media, and more. Get your ticket specials available on Island E-Tickets and various outlets nationwide, or visit the Million Laughs handles for more info. It's Comedy Commerce in Tobago, a wee kind of commerce.
Welcome back to the program. We're talking now with the minority leader in the Tobago House of Assembly, that's Mr. Kelvon Morris. He says he agrees with the fare increases on both the air bridge and the sea bridge between Trinidad and Tobago. In the budget for 2023, the Minister of Finance said, the pensioners would no longer enjoy the ferry free of charge between both points. He said they not have to pay a $25 increase one way on this trip. He also increased the one-way fare from $50 to $75 and a premium from $100 to $150. One-way air tickets moved from $150 to $200. Mr. Morris, thanks for talking with us on this. I want to start by asking you whether you have any, do you have a prerogative not to agree at all? If you didn't agree, you'd say so?
Well, good morning, Mr. Johnson. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Of course, I kind of disagree, and it is not one of agreement, but it's one of understanding. And I wish we did not have to have an increase in the prices at this time. But at the same time, I understand that both the sea bridge and the air bridge is heavily subsidized. And because the country, the economy, like the world, is basically under pressure at this time, the government has no choice but to look at areas as to where they can reduce expenditure. And the air and sea bridge is one of those areas that is heavily subsidized. In fact, the air bridge is subsidized to the tune of $50 million, and the sea bridge even more, at the tune of $167 million. And we must also consider that the government recently procured 2 brand new fast ferry vessels, which is an additional cost to the taxpayer. So in those circumstances, and understanding that the price we currently pay for both air and sea travel is basically among the lowest in the world. When you think about a sea bridge, a ticket via the fast ferry for almost less than $10 when you consider that to ride in the train in the States, it is really something that you would understand. So while you would hope that it doesn't increase, you understand that, it is not something that is onerous. And I went on to say at the same time, the state, through their agencies, must ensure that we get the kind of efficient service that we are paying for. Because if you are asking people to pay a little bit more, you, on the other side, must also hold up your end of the bargain and ensure that persons can get, predictable and reliable air and sea transport service, especially the air bridge. We have a situation in Tobago where it is almost untenable. If we are serious about tourism, then the reduced air travel between Trinidad and Tobago is untenable and must be adjusted. It must be treated. I welcome the fact that they are allowing increased flights for the Carnival, but it should not only be for the Carnival, because I tell you this, once you are taking a connected flight from North America to Tobago, to Trinidad, and trying to get to Tobago, you almost have to overnight, and that is a situation that none of us should be comfortable with.
All right, but to what extent that itself is a function of what it costs to operate these schedules, and that the carriers, or we're talking about Caribbean Airlines in particular here on that, they continue to operate with depressed prices and depressed fares and so on, and so that they're looking at it from their business point of view. How much sympathy there is or understanding there is for that, as to why one wouldn't think that the airline is simply not doing that to spite anybody or to be indifferent, to exercise indifference to people who have to move between points. It is a question of what makes better business sense, no?
Well, the ANC bridge cannot only be seen in the context of commercial viability, because it is an essential service. There are essential connecting points between the two islands, Trinidad and Tobago, and therefore there must be that kind of consideration as well. And we are saying the people aren't unreasonable, and that is why I would have heard persons right in Tobago saying they are not uncomfortable paying a bit more for a more reliable service, because they also understand that it's quite costly to operate, airline in the first instance, and there must be some balance between viability and the essentiality in terms of the essential nature of the service. But at the same time, if we are also trying to push tourism in the way that we should, and if we understand the economic spin-off of tourism activity, then therefore we must also do some investment in the air bridge that would accrue benefits to the tourism sector in Tobago, both Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, what do you make of the fact, though, that in announcing these increases, the Minister of Finance put them in terms of one-way fares? I mean, something is, well, certainly I and other people who look at it are missing something. You either raise the fare, and it's be talking about two ways. What is the nicety about denominating it on the basis of one-way travel? What do you think it is?
Well, I think it allows persons to have a clearer understanding of the individual nature of the travel in terms of how you see your travel rather than a collective. You're able to see that if I'm going to Trinidad, I pay X, and if I am returning from Trinidad, I pay Y. So it allows that disaggregation of the cost, because there's some people who come to Tobago for long-term arrangements. When you think about persons coming for the basis of they may be coming for, rather than leisure, they're coming for business and that kind of thing, and they do long stays. So if you're traveling one way, you understand what would be the cost of that travel. And more than that, in going forward, there's a conversation in the space about whether, locals or citizens of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago should pay a different fare from persons visiting the island, the country, Trinidad and Tobago. For me, there has to be some more in-depth research and in-depth consideration, because in the one hand, you can, turn off international visitors who are trying to connect to Tobago through Trinidad. And in the other instance, you have the situation where taxpayers of Trinidad and Tobago are really carrying the burden of expense for everyone. So I think CAL itself requires, more in-depth studies as to how we can make the inter-island air service more viable, but at the same time, more reliable as well.
To what extent that is an issue currently on the agenda in discussions at the Assembly?
Well, I know the Chief Secretary did mention a consideration like that, so I am sure that in his discussion and in the Assembly's discussion with CAL, that is something that would be raised. But at the same time, I think CAL also has a duty to look at, flexible ways as to how we treat with this inter-island service, because it cannot be a simple situation as saying that is not viable, and then because it's not viable, we won't increase. CAL has to show some ingenuity. They have to show some creativity as to how we can make the inter-island air service both efficient and viable at the same time.
Yeah, and what do you know about what people on the streets and in their communities in Tobago are saying, how they're reacting to this announcement of the increases in these fares? Are people as comfortable with it as you are?
Well, for quite some time, persons have been clamoring for more flights, and persons have been saying, I know in my space and as I walk my district, people have been saying that we don't mind paying a little bit more once we know we can get the flights, because it had become such a frustrating situation for Tobagonians especially, because, whereas Trinidadians would come to Tobago mainly for leisure, Tobagonians, in many instances, out of necessity, whether business, whether educational, whether medical or so, have to travel to Trinidad. And therefore, the nature of travel becomes a little more essential and a little more urgent. And because of that, Tobagonians have resolved in themselves that if it requires us paying a little bit more to get increased and better service, then so be it. And I think that is really the general consensus in Tobago. Of course, we are under pressure. Everybody know that at this time, the prices are increasing, in the groceries, and your disposable income is reducing at the same time. But at this time, I think the fare increase is one that people understand, especially if it redounds to us getting more reliable service, increased flights, and that kind of thing.
All right, so we will be talking in the next segment with Mr. Leroy George. He's the secretary of the organization called Tobago Civil Net, on the issues that still remaining and surrounding the moving of people, the relocation of people in that part of in Scarborough to make way for the further expansion. Well, in this case, the roads that will lead to and from the expanded A&R Robinson International Airport. What is your side's position on what transpired? We talked with a young lady a couple of days ago, and she was still decrying the manner in which the people who were holding out resistance were moved. And she says it's not fair and it was not dignified, among other things.
Well, of course, we sympathize with all the persons who had to be relocated. Relocation could never and will never be an easy thing. Some people have, that sentimental value, that traditional value, and Tobagonians generally are persons, that really hold on to their history and to their indigenous, those sentimental things. So we know that it is something that is difficult, but as we see it as well, the airport expansion is a project that is required at this time. If Tobago is to move forward its tourism potential, if we are to be able to generate the kind of tourism activity, we must have that airport connectivity. It starts with access. And the access, this airport project is one that is really needed. So there's a balance. And all I would say is that we must ensure that in terms of the relocation, that persons are treated fairly. And for the most part, what I've witnessed is that the majority of persons would have negotiated with NITCO and would have reached a point of agreement that they believe they can resettle. And we have one, I think it's one block left with about 10 families or so that had to go through the process of that court order to be removed, and that was unfortunate. But at the same time, I believe they still have the opportunity to get some form of some form of compensation, which I hope at the end of the day would be one that will assist them in resettling and moving on with their lives.
And the contention is that, at least in the last couple of movements where people were, from the reports that we have, were forcibly moved. They were moved against their will because they were still working on getting a package that they considered to be just and justified, and that didn't happen. And people were moved forcefully or forcibly moved from where they are, where they were, and sent to places that were decided for them, and they're still working out whether or not they can receive the kind of compensation that is appropriate and that is commensurate with their expectations and what the realities are of finding alternative accommodation, alternative properties to build on or to move into as to where they are sent. To what extent that continues to be an issue?
Well, I do not have the facts of that matter, but what I know is that notices were served and the persons would have had an idea as to the period of time they had to treat with negotiations, etc. Notwithstanding that, the THA, especially this PDP administration, has been on record as saying that they would stand in the gap for Tobagonians, and there's nothing stopping the THA at this point in treating and assisting those persons who are affected. And I would hope going forward that the THA will play its part, because the THA have a number of lands all across Tobago. And in fact, there are lands that have been developed specifically for this purpose. So I would hope that the THA and the arms of the THA, through the Division of Settlements, etc., would step in and provide the kind of support to these residents, understanding, one, that the project is essential to our own tourism efforts, and at the same time, these persons are Tobagonians that they themselves been clamoring should be treated fairly. So if there's a situation where the law, as it provides, does not adequately treat with the challenges of these persons, then there's nothing stopping this THA administration from assisting in those regards.
And you think that they have a duty to do that? That's what you're saying. They have a duty to do that, and are you saying because?
Of course, the THA has a role to play, and they should now play their role, which is utilize the lands that were developed for the persons who had to be relocated. And if they believe that at this point they may not be able to afford the price of the lands, then there's nothing stopping the THA from taking a policy position that we would give them the lands for free. There's nothing stopping the THA.
I want to ask you, what do you see any diminution in the way in which the current administration is going about the business of representing the people, given what appears to be the conflict in their own ranks? To what extent that has reduced the effectiveness or the attention that they should be paying to the affairs of administration in the island? Any?
Well, the PDP administration has lost its way from the very beginning. And what would have happened in the PDP is that the leadership would have recognized that the very things that they promised the people of Tobago, this Farley-led administration is not delivering. So they too have come to the conclusion that they have hoodwinked the people of Tobago, and it is unfortunate at this time, because there's a situation that is happening with respect to how they are treating local contractors. The THA has given out over $309 million in road resurfacing contractors in contracts, and not one of those contractors are contractors from Tobago, when the Tobago contractors have the capacity, they have the experience, they have the funding to do the very works and do it at a lower price. At this point, the THA has some contractors being audited because they are claiming that the price they were paying for hot mix, which was $1,400, was inflated and above the normal rate paid. However, in this same arrangement, the THA this current PDP administration has turned around, and they are now paying contractors $2,700 per ton for the same hot mix that they are saying inflated, which is almost 100% higher than what they are claiming is inflated. So at this point, Tobagonians are seeing clearly this PDP administration has lost its way. The PDP administration is simply about itself, and the claim that they will come in to fix Tobago is an illusion. They are currently only fixing themselves.
And you're making these claims and you're calling these figures without fear of being contradicted. You know what you're talking about.
Without fear of contradiction, because the political leader of the PNM presented these facts in a press conference, and up to this day, those claims have not been refuted.
All right, so we're gonna have to leave it there. But thank you very much, Mr.
You're most welcome.
Mr. Kelvin Morris, the minority leader at the Tobago House of Assembly. Well, let's take let's get going to joint. At least let's start it a jaunt, as a matter of fact. We're going to go to Greendot, our first step around the region, and there the country's Mobilization, Implementation and Transportation Minister paid a visit to the Disaster Management Agency to monitor the renovation of some work there. Let's take a look from GIS is reporting on that.
Mobilization, Implementation and Transformation Minister Honorable Andy Williams recently paid a visit to the National Disaster Management Agency's former headquarters at Fort Frederick to monitor the progress of renovation on the building, which will be used to temporarily house units of the RGPF. Minister Williams was accompanied by a team from the Royal Grenada Police Force. The building will undergo extensive restoration work under the local component of the OECS Regional Tourism Competitiveness Project. The regional project has 3 participating islands: Grenada, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. Grenada accessed $6 million from the $26 million US project financed by the World Bank to relocate the Royal Grenada Police Force headquarters.
Basically, we are engaging on a World Bank project that should have been in place some years now. And the project involved the beautification of Fort George, right? And the restoration of Fort George. And it's going to enhance it as a tourism site. So in doing so, we have to move part of the police headquarters. And we decided to move it up on this area here in Monjaloo. You call it Fort Frederick, right? Fort Frederick. And we are going to move the stores area. We are also going to move the tailor shop. And also we are going to move the drug squad unit. And that is to give us enough space so that we can do the works at Fort George. So this is the reason why we are up here, and we are doing some works on the building right now to ensure that it is safe and it is ready to be, so that people can be, that we can start the accommodation process in.
Minister Williams says his ministry will ensure that the transition of the RGPF to the building will be done smoothly and on time.
This project here will take approximately 3 months, right? And we have approximately 8 months to finish the project at Fort George. So it's a project that MIT will be looking to push and to ensure that we do not lose funding for it, and that we do it in the shortest possible time. We are looking at let's say December for the police headquarters, part of it, to be relocated to this area right here at Fort Frederick. And I'm in contact with the contractor to ensure that we even do it before December, so it can be in a short time.
All right, and we go to St. Lucia now, where there the HDS News Force organization is reporting about the fact that the opposition United Workers' Party has called for the immediate removal of Stanley Felix from the Senate as president.
Has Senate President Stanley Felix allegedly landed himself in hot water? On Thursday, October 7th, the government of St. Lucia confirmed that, quote, President of the Senate, Stanley Felix, was taken into custody to assist with an ongoing police investigation. The Prime Minister is awaiting further information on the issue and will make a statement at the appropriate time, end quote. On Friday morning, the opposition United Workers' Party expressed its shock on the matter, calling for the removal of Felix as Senate President. A statement from the UWP reads, quote, "In light of this astounding development and the sensitivity of the position of President of the Senate, the United Workers' Party calls on Prime Minister Philip J. Pierre to immediately relieve Stanley Felix of that position." End quote. The news follows quickly on the heels of a civil judgment against Felix for alleged unpaid rent owed to SLP stalwart Elizabeth Darius Clark. This separate matter was addressed at a UWP press conference held on Thursday morning before news of Felix's detention broke. Ex-Health Minister Mary Isaac deferred to the SLP on the matter of the rental case.
I think that is an internal Labour Party matter. What we have seen is that the Labour Party usually do not ask anybody to resign, regardless of what they do. I mean, they've had situations before where we had the doctor situation, and that went on and on and on.
The UWP representatives were pressed on whether Felix should resign as Senate President over the civil case involving the alleged unpaid rent.
You must have a conscience as a public figure, and things get to a point where you have to decide whether you step down or not, because remember that the public hold you up with a certain amount of respect, and they expect certain things from you as a person in that sort of position. You know, you are also a role model to a lot of people, a lot of young people, to a lot of people in the country who may want to emulate your lifestyle, you know, what you have done in the country and what they expect of you. So the individual has a lot of that. In terms of a decision, it really rests on the individual and his party.
As for the recent and very separate detention regarding the ongoing police investigation, the United Workers' Party described the matter as, quote, "another dark day in the history of St. Lucia."
All right, that takes us up to a break for the news time. We continue after that with our discussion with Mr. Leroy George. He's the secretary of the organization known as the Tobago Civil Net. Stay with us. This is AM Prime.
Diwali is in the air again, and Royal Castle reminds you to try its yummy veggie burger. The Royal Castle veggie burger is great on its own or in a combo with a side and a 16-ounce drink. And it's healthy too. A nutritious patty made with oats, lentils, chana, potatoes, and carrot. Inside a soft bun with tomatoes and lettuce. So for this season, try the Castle's tasty and healthy veggie burger. Shubh Diwali from Royal Castle. It's Diwali time again, and that means delicious vegetarian cuisine. Chief has all your herbs and spices for Diwali. Curry, jeera, saffron, garam masala, and more for all your talkari. Cinnamon, clove, nutmeg, ginger, and cardamom for those delectable sweets. Brown rice, dal, and chana for those tasty delicacies. And of course, Chief baking powder for soft and light roti. This Diwali, remember, the Chief reason is always taste.
Here's your WESN News on the Hour. I am Denise Sinclair. Thanks for joining us. Here are the headlines. UNCPRO slams media for coverage of NACTA poll results. Tobago Island-wide blackout. 3 arrested after foiled robbery. Minister Al-Rawi not faced by calls for resignation. And internationally, Bahamas increases minimum wage. Now for the details. Opposition PRO Dr. Kirk Mayhew has sought to discredit the NACTA poll, describing it as an organization that appears to be nothing more than the mercenary identity of someone ready to create so-called polls to suit the agenda of whoever is paying him. In a statement, Dr. Mayhew called on the media to stop this sham of pretending that these polls have any credibility or statistical integrity whatsoever. He added that pollsters in general are not held accountable for being consistently and grossly erroneous in predicting results. NACTA, really appearing to be just that person in his own mind, is perhaps the most egregious and brazen of the lot. There was a blackout in the sister isle of Tobago on Wednesday. The outage occurred around 11:33 a.m. According to TNTech Corporate Communications, Annabelle Brasnell, a fault occurred at the Cove Generation Plant, leading to a brief island-wide outage. Within 10 minutes, restoration of supply commenced, and at this time, customers were restored. TNTech continued work to ensure full restoration of all affected. 3 suspects have been arrested, a firearm seized and a stolen vehicle recovered as officers operating under the Active Patrol Grid system foiled a robbery in progress in Marval on Tuesday. According to police reports, around 12:50 p.m., officers were proceeding south along Saddle Road, Marval. Upon reaching Valot Street, they observed 2 men, one armed with a firearm, placing their hands in the pockets of a man in a violent manner. Upon seeing the officers, both suspects ran east along Valot Street in an attempt to escape. The officers gave chase and the suspects were eventually apprehended. Local government Minister Faraz Al-Rawi says he's not fazed by calls for him to resign. He made the comment in response to the most recent call from the opposition leader.
She's been calling for my resignation for 13 years straight. The day Mrs. Prasad Bisesa didn't call for my resignation, I think she'd be ill. So I know that her mission is to try and unseat her opponents. She's entitled to the freedom of expression and political expression, and I respect that freedom in this country. But Mrs. Prasad Bisesa has been calling for my head for 13 years straight.
In international news now, Prime Minister of Bahamas has announced an increase in the island's minimum wage and temporary price controls on certain goods, including eggs, bread, and diapers, amid a spike in inflation. The minimum wage will increase from $210 to $260 per week. It will be retroactive from July for public employees and will go into effect January 2023 for the private sector. It's only the second time in 2 decades that the Bahamian government has raised the minimum wage. The last occurred in 2015 with weekly wage raising from $150 to $210. Well, that was your news to the hour on WESN. I am Denise Sinclair. Thanks for watching.
That's all the big son. Bungie remember them days? Well, all right, Bungie might remember, but Ian Alvarez remember them. Don't forget the rest of the union. Forget the rest. Me and you talking alone here. Ian, remember the days when you went to the fridge with your hot bake in your hand to get blue band butter, but the blue band butter done. And they went for the yellow, the golden ray. They're shaking their head. No, listen, you don't know what it is when you bite a baked golden ray, my dear. once that big heart would go your red.
Saturday, November 5th, Shore Park, Tobago. It's Million Laughs Caribbean Comedy Commerce, the mega laugh festival to end the Tobago Carnival season, featuring Tobago's finest in folklore and musical entertainment, together with some of the Caribbean's top comedians: Larry Joseph, Daryl the Saint Mendoza, Dolores, Alan the Entertainer, Handsome Sun, Mako Media, and more. Get your ticket specials available on Island E-Tickets and various outlets nationwide, or visit the Million Laughs handles for more info. It's Comedy Commerce in Tobago, a wee kind of commerce.
Welcome back to the program. Well, we discussed it in the earlier segment with the Minority Leader in the Tobago House of Assembly. We're taking a deeper dive into this issue. We'd spoken with Ms. Rhonda Hackett a couple of days ago about it as well. She is from an organization which the initials for which are PEECE, and it has to do with seeking equitable compensation for everyone who is being asked or who has been asked to move from where they may have lived for generations, one generation to the next, to make way for the further expansion of the routes to and from the new A&R Robinson International Airport, about which there's all this contention about people moving for less than the values of their properties, for less than what they would expect to put up premises that are anywhere near to where they have lived. Mr. George has agreed to expand on that discussion on this edition of the program. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you for having me. How are you going today?
Well, very good, thanks. So let's see where we would take the discussion of it, because I was saying Ms. Hackett, we spoke with her a couple of days ago, and she was making the point that she was very passionate about it, that the last set of people who were moved for all intents and purposes forcefully, and not in any kind of way that gives them the sense of comfort that what they will receive will be commensurate with what they should receive, and to maintain the standard under which they live, whatever kind of accommodation they will be able to afford where they have been put.
Yes. Generally, that is the understanding right across Tobago. About 50% on average, sometimes a little bit more, sometimes even a little bit less, was the compensation compared from what a lot of the residents, they would have had evaluators evaluate their properties, and then the government would have had their evaluators evaluate the properties. And generally speaking, it would be about 50% of what the private evaluators who were hired by the private residents would have come up with. And the Land Acquisition Act speaks very clearly towards that. It says very clearly that when you are confiscating or taking land through the Land Acquisition Act to do any project, etc., the compensation should be more or less about the same thing as what would have happened had that land and property been sold voluntarily. Of course, the Land Acquisition Act also goes on to say that when there isn't an agreement between the two parties, that situation should be settled in the judicial system through the courts. And that never happened. I don't know the reason it never happened, but it never happened. And as a result, we're now in a situation where, because everybody has been moved out, the last family, the Alexander family, has been moved out. We're just looking at the mistakes that were made, and obviously that was one of the mistakes that were made, and trying to learn going into the future so that this situation doesn't repeat itself, because obviously it was very morbid.
Right, so does that mean then that people will simply, by the force of circumstances, have to accept what they get, or are there avenues by which people can contest that, even ex post facto, having been moved?
That's an excellent question. Now that they have been moved, and some of these people have not collected their compensation. As a matter of fact, the last family to move being the Alexander family, I'm hearing and understanding that not only are they being compensated much less than what they should have been compensated, but because there was not a conclusive ending to this situation, they're going to have to be paying legal fees that could amount to as much as $100,000. So you have to then deduct that from the overall value of the property that they would have lost. And so that situation could, and most likely still is, in the judicial system. And if it's not in the judicial system just yet, it could go into the judicial system. As for the other people, we're looking at about 120 different property owners with their families, etc. I would like to believe that that situation could go ahead and continue to be fought for in the judicial system. And it's pretty important that we still pay attention to it, because I think I would have mentioned before, a lot of people here in Tobago, they're saying, okay, whatever formula was used to pay those guys on average about 50% of what they expected to get paid, when the property taxes are being paid across the nation throughout Trinidad and Tobago, we would expect that formula to be applied also. So it's something that could affect every single property owner in Trinidad and Tobago, and we should continue to pay attention to it.
All right, I want to come back to the moving and all the implications of it as we move to the next stage. But I just want to ask, to what extent, so the moving has been completed now, the works that are required to be done subject to that moving, have those begun?
Oh yes, most of those buildings have already come down, right? They've been broken down. NIDCO is in charge of that. Also working with NIDCO is the China Railroad Company. And if you go into the area now, you'd see almost all the buildings have been taken down. The ones that have not been taken down, you'd see that stuff has been removed. It just hasn't completed itself 100%, but the work has begun.
All right, so let's come back on the question of values. And you said that they would do two different sets of evaluators, one working in the interest of the people and the other working in the interest of the government. Would their mandates not be such that their conclusions would be as wide apart as they were?
Well,
the government evaluators would want to go for probably the lowest possible acceptable rate, and the people working in the interest of the people would operate from the other opposite perspective. That's not fair to surmise?
Well, what the persons were, and this is a situation where if persons were aware of what exactly the law says, we could have probably avoided the situation, because the persons would have, once they realized that they were being offered much less than what they expected to get, they actually turned to the government, because the government, of course, are the representatives of the people, and said, well, what is the step do we take to mediate over this situation? And they would have been told that they could seek mediation. And so when they seeked mediation, in at least one case, and I suspect it may have been most of all the cases, but I know for sure that in at least one case, the evaluator that was used by the government that valued the person's property at more or less half the value was the same evaluator that was used by the mediators. So it's like, it's a betrayal of trust. That is what happened. They trusted the government to do the right thing. When they see the right thing wasn't happening, they asked, well, how can we deal with this situation? And then again, they were betrayed by the same government. And it's a very interesting position to be in, because now we realize that as a people here in Tobago, and I'm sure in Trinidad, you guys would see similar situations occurring. It's the same central government. We need to be more aware of what our rights are and what moves we could make, because maybe in times past we could have trusted the government to do the right thing. Maybe that isn't the case as much now as it was in times past, if it ever was like that.
And that need for the greater sense of awareness, you think that has been a direct result of this move, and you think that that will happen, that there has to be development of a greater sense of awareness of what is and what should give?
Yes, definitely, because even though this was a central government situation, there was also in the Tobago space the situation where Pochoy Charles, the first chief secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly would have advised the people and would have advised the new Chief Secretary that one of the ways we could have dealt with this situation was for the Tobago House of Assembly to file for to hold the proceedings, right? I'm trying to remember the exact words necessary, the legal terminology, but to put a hold to the proceedings by taking the matter to court, where THA themselves would have been the ones that are holding the proceedings in contrast to the residents. And he would have also advised that if the residents were the ones that would have filed for the injunction in contrast to THA, that it wasn't going to work and it would be thrown out of court. However, the Tobago House of Assembly, at first the Tobago House of Assembly Executive Council seemed to have been siding with the people in whole, but after meeting with the China Railroad Company, we saw that there was a change in the way they went about dealing with these Crown Point residents. And instead of filing for the injunction, they refused to file for the injunction. Crown Point residents tried to file for the injunction on their own. It got thrown out just as was expected through the advice of the first Chief Secretary of the Tobago House of Assembly. And at least we had the awareness. So there was a situation whereby the Tobago House of Assembly had to be accountable to some extent. I don't think they ever addressed that issue publicly, right? I did have some conversation over Facebook with the present Chief Secretary about it. I don't think it has been addressed publicly, but to some extent, at least the people are aware of what's going on. And as a result, those who represent us are aware that we are aware, and they will have to be a little bit more socially responsible in the future.
All right, I want to extend that discussion on that point about the role and function that the organization that you run plays, the Tobago Civil Net. But just for the purposes of illuminating on the wordplay with titles and so on, for people who may not know the technicalities that were involved. When you say that Mr. Charles was the first Chief Secretary, there are people who would know the history of the setting up of the Assembly and may question that and say, well, no, it was A.N.R. Robinson, but he was it when he was called the chairman, but then they moved to a different kind of format, and then the title removed from chairman to Chief Secretary, and that's how Mr. Charles became the first secretary, the first Chief Secretary, right?
Yes, the Tobago House of Assembly is the oldest political institution in Trinidad and Tobago. That's because Tobago would have been properly colonized before Trinidad was. Trinidad was under the control of the Amerindians for a very long time, I think longer than any other Caribbean island in the entire archipelago, which is the West Indies. And in 1776, I believe it was, if it's not 1776, I got it off by a year or two. We had the Tobago House of Assembly, and of course that was a very autonomous institution because it was the early part of the real colonization of Tobago. Anyway, after the riots that happened, the Belmana riots that happened shortly after slavery, it was discontinued, and then it came back into existence in 1980. But when it came back into existence, it, just as you would have alluded, it did not come back to the extent where autonomy is concerned that it is now, and it certainly did not come back to the extent where autonomy is concerned that it was when it started in the 1760s. But as we got more and more autonomy, the titles began to change more and more. And by the time Hochoy Charles became the leader, because it wasn't just A.N.R. Robinson, there was even Dinoon before Hochoy Charles. By the time Hochoy Charles came into play, that's when he became the first Chief Secretary. And everybody since then was a Chief Secretary. Even in the bills that were attempted to pass to replace Act 40 of 1996, there would have been a change in the title of the highest ranked official in the Tobago House of Assembly. I think that person would have been referred to as a premier. So that's an even.
I think Dr. Rita Pemberton continues to provide some essential historical service there with the pieces that she writes that are published in Tobago News. And there was a time, there was a time when, if you were when the British sort of became in ascendancy in Trinidad, and when you got, as a public servant, when you got transferred from Tobago to Trinidad, you felt as though you were demoted. And there's a story about that Dr. Brinsley Samu, who has written about a British civil servant who then went to Cyprus, and he alleges in his writing that the man committed suicide. He jumped off a train because he'd been transferred from Tobago to Trinidad. And that's how the hierarchy was seen in those days. Tobago was seen as more important than Trinidad.
And of course, that it's seen as more important if you're looking at it from a Eurocentric perspective, because when you consider the fact that, yes, Tobago, but if I was, well, I am a Trinidadian also, I'm not just a Tobagonian.
Okay.
But
what do you,
I think it's
what do you mean? Well,
I was born in San Grande. I came here when I was 5 years old, and I've been here. I'm 38 years old now.
All right.
But the Trinidadian, I would advise Trinidadians to be proud, because while from a Eurocentric perspective, Tobago may have been seen as more developed, more civilized than Trinidad, more Europeanized than Trinidad up until relatively recently in history. It's also important to remember from an Amerindian perspective, Trinidad could be seen as being more resilient than the rest of the Caribbean, because Trinidad was the first place where the Amerindians would have settled close to Port of Spain. We're talking about, I can't remember the name of that particular group of persons, but Trinidad would have been the first, and it would have been the last place to really be conquered, as in you have persons like Arima, who Arima is named after, that would have really held Trinidad down. And it's important to remember these things, because these things do play a role in today when we understand who we are as a people and the role that we should have within the Caribbean. Because as you remember, when the Caribbean was one nation, still a colony, but the Federation of the West Indies, the capital was in Trinidad, and Trinidad was really the center of that situation. Even more so than Jamaica.
Yes,
and
there's continuing discussion about that. The native peoples groups in the country. One group is called Nipoyo, and there's another group that other people lead, and there are discussions among themselves as to who should get pride of place in terms of being among the first set of first peoples in the country. But that's another discussion. I just want to ask you about the Tobago Civil Net. So this was an issue in which you all were centrally involved. What are a couple of the other issues in which this organization, which is, for all intents and purposes, or at least you profess to be apolitical and non-political, but you look at issues having to do with how the effects of positions taken politically or administratively affect the people, and you respond to those?
Yes, Tobago Civil Net is apolitical. As you would notice even from this interview, while some criticism, for want of a better terminology, was put out towards the central government, which is led by the PNM. The same could be said for the THA in this situation, because Tobago Civil Net, yes, we do have some people who support PDP, we do have some people who support PNM, we do have people who support even UNC. UNC does have a base here in Tobago still. When we get together in that place called Tobago Civil Net, when neutrality is the rule, when we get together in that place, we're able to then look at things from a neutral perspective, because we have to look at things from a neutral perspective if we are to keep the kind of relationship amongst ourselves going, so that we
How challenging is that? Because in Trinidad as well, there's a lot of discussion about people are remonstrated against the notion of putting country first, and we say we do that sometimes. People say what I'm doing is because I'm putting country first, but for a lot of us, it is putting country first means putting my party first. How do you work out the differences sometimes when you have issues to talk about, and people have their loyalties to one group or the other politically? How do those things get subsumed or get sort of put down the ladder in terms of making a decision that is for genuinely the benefit of the country and the people, or in this case, the island and the people, above my particular political affiliation or association?
Formalities and procedures, they are so important. I don't think people understand the extent to which they're important. A lot of the biases that would come into a conversation could be avoided if you have certain situations whereby I am not expected to speak until I could back whatever I'm saying with facts, like facts from a reliable source. And the reliable source could be limited to things like traditional media, like this is a traditional media right here also. And also rules, like we have a chairperson, right? By the way, I noticed you may have said the organization I run. I don't know if you're talking about me or the group of us. I am not anywhere near the highest ranked person. We do have a chairman, Mr. Rodney Pigot. We have a vice chair, such persons. But we do have a chairman who would make sure, just like the presiding officer in the Tobago House of Assembly or the Speaker of the House in Parliament would say, well, okay, this person is speaking at this time, we have to listen to this person at this time, and then the next person gets to speak. We do have that type of setup that helps to govern the conversation. And of course, if the first person that speaks is speaking entirely factual, let's say that person is a PDP person or somebody that supports PDP. When the second person, a PNM person, comes to speak, they would feel very foolish if they don't maintain that same standard. And if they're not maintaining that same standard, the chairman will come inside and say, okay, please bring information to us that comes from a
all right, thank you very much. We're gonna have to leave it there. But we will continue this discussion as we go along. The role of civil society as opposed to the role of political affiliation, one way or the other. But thank you very much, Mr. George, Leroy George, Secretary of the Tobago Civil Net Organization.
Thank you very much for having me.
All right, we want to take you out with this. Watch this, and we tell you to look at it. The Prime Minister on Saturday officially opened the Mahika Sports Complex in Point Fortune. Take a look at some of what transpired there.
Remember, the key to success is working hard. For our country, we must have regard. Forget all your differences, let we start to build. And onward to progress we surely will. Because now, more than ever we must show discipline, tolerance and production to build a strong and better nation. I believe that is the main foundation. So come let us work hand in hand, because this is our land. Come my brother, come my sister, let us build a nation together. Yeah. Whoa. Yeah. Everything may not always go your way, but sometimes you need to put the me aside and think about the we. Yeah? So what we gonna do? We're gonna build our nation together. Regardless of what, we're gonna come together and make it happen. Yeah? Come. Let us build a nation together. Yeah? I say come. Let us build a nation together. Let us build a nation.
The revival of what used to be Mahika Oval, one of the better sporting grounds anywhere in Trinidad and Tobago, along with other places down there called what used to be called Industry Park and Guaracara Park, and to a lesser extent Forest Reserve. But that's our broadcast for this morning. We want to thank you for watching. We want to thank all our guests. We tell you can get in touch with us here at AM Prime, at WESNCC on all our social media platforms. You could send your emails to amprime@wesncc.com. I'm Andy Johnson. Thanks for watching. In half an hour, we have news at the top of the hour, followed by the next edition of Talking Point with Shah and Small. But for now, for this, we see you tomorrow.
WESN